What's the only thing that stings a TV network more than an almighty flop? An almighty flop that cost a gazillion dollars to make. It's not always easy defining a flop in the streaming era. Streamers often hide viewership data, and there's even less transparency about how that data translates into profit. And you'll find no better example of these muddy waters than Star Wars: The Acolyte.
We're doomed.
The Acolyte was the second most watched new show on Disney Plus in 2024, a statistic which, on its own, makes it look like a real success story. But it seems the audience dropped off over the course of the season, with the finale reportedly getting the lowest viewership figures of any live-action Star Wars TV finale. Despite a cliffhanger clearly meant to lead into a second season, Disney canceled The Acolyte soon after the first, cementing its legacy as a flop. It didn't help that Season 1 had been so expensive either. All 8 episodes went well over budget, and the finale alone was reported to cost over $230 million, which would have put a ton of pressure on the show to perform well. Perhaps the final nail in the coffin was the extremely divisive response from the Star Wars fandom. The first season of Westworld was expensive, at somewhere between $88 million and $100 million to make 10 episodes, but it was at least popular enough to justify that price. Yet each subsequent season became even more expensive even as viewership dropped off. With a budget of at least $160 million, Westworld Season 4 cost far more than Season 1, despite containing fewer episodes, and with only a quarter as many people watching across TV and streaming.
These violent delights have violent ends.
Originally planned to span 5 seasons by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, HBO canceled Westworld before it got the chance to round out its story. To add insult to injury, the show was also removed from HBO Max. Instead, it was unceremoniously dumped on FAST channels. Westworld ended up a cautionary tale for any mystery box show growing too expansive and confusing. The first season wasn't necessarily easy to follow, but it had a straightforward hook on which to hang its enigmas. Essentially, it was Jurassic Park with cowboy robots. By Season 4, though, the robots had long left the park, and the show's post-human apocalyptic wars and multiple levels of simulations were just too much to keep up with, let alone explain. Or, to put it another way,
your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
The Witcher was an undeniable success. The Witcher Blood Origin, however, was anything but. Although this prequel was intended as a miniseries and therefore never risked being formally canceled, odds are that it would have been a long shot for renewal if that option was on the table. For fans of The Witcher, Blood Origin was a massive disappointment, completely lacking in the charm and thoughtfulness that made the original series a hit. And the disappointment may have been even greater for Netflix shareholders. The Witcher Blood Origin was reported to have cost over $50 million to shoot, which put its per-episode budget at a whopping $12 million. And that's before you factor in post-production costs, which are usually vast for effects-heavy shows. We also know that, per Netflix's January to June 2023 engagement report, Blood Origin was viewed for roughly the same amount of watching hours as Made in the 6 months following its release, an incomparably less costly fellow miniseries that had been released a full year earlier. Frankly, those are disastrous numbers for what ought to have been a sure-thing spin-off from one of Netflix's sturdier properties. It just goes to show that brand connection does not a success make. Official budget figures for Marvel Television's Inhumans never went public, although it's probably fair to assume that it was cheaper to make than the Disney Plus Marvel shows. That said, it was estimated that the show's production in Hawaii would inject between $80 million and $100 million into the local economy, so we can guess that each of the show's 8 episodes cost somewhere in the 8-figure range. Filming the pilot with IMAX cameras wouldn't have come cheap either. And here's the kicker. All that money went into what is still the single worst reviewed production in the history of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards.
At the 2018 Television Critics Association press tour, ABC's Channing Dungey charitably described the show's Nielsen ratings as less exciting than he had hoped, so it'll come as no surprise to learn that the show didn't get a Season 2. It's since been said that Inhumans was only produced in the first place because then Marvel chairman Ike Perlmutter insisted on using the characters to compensate for Marvel's lack of X-Men movie rights. Much has happened since then, though. Kevin Feige took over Marvel Television in the Disney Plus era, and the X-Men rights have returned to the studio following Disney's purchase of 20th Century Fox. So what little purpose this awful series had in the world has now vanished into nothing. Halo was supposed to be a big breakthrough show for Paramount Plus. an adaptation of the game franchise of the same name. This blockbuster series was to catapult the Paramount streamer into the upper echelon of streaming services, alongside the likes of Netflix, Prime Video, and Max. This dream led Paramount to spend a stunning amount of money on Halo. Upwards of $10 million per episode was doled out for the first season, with some figures placing the budget for those first 9 episodes as high as $200 million. This was to ensure that the elaborate sci-fi world-building and film-grade action sequences would be worthy of a flagship release from a major studio platform. Although those lofty production values were praised across the board by critics and viewers, the same could not be said for the storytelling behind Halo. Over $90 million later, the show's first season totally failed to live up to audience expectations. The second batch of episodes, which had been greenlit before the release of Season 1, didn't exactly save the day either. And so, in 2024, Paramount Plus canceled the show that should have made its name. You may have heard of National Treasure: Edge of History, the Disney Plus series released in late 2022 as a continuation of the 2000s hugely successful National Treasure film series.
Good afternoon, sir. Hello.
But you may just as well not have heard of it. And for a show that reportedly cost nearly $8 million per episode to make, that's a huge problem. Created by Cormac and Marion Wibberley, who also co-wrote the scripts to the original National Treasure films, Edge of History brims with earnest reverence for its source material, even if it does replace its greatest asset with an all-new set of characters and actors. With a reported budget of over $79 million, the first season began airing in December 2022 and rang in the new year for Disney Plus with solid but hardly earth-shattering viewership numbers. Like many Disney Plus productions, the show bumped into a wall when it came to critical reception. It seemed hard to tell if it was a grown-up affair, as suggested by its violent tone and sober political framing, or if it was strictly kiddie business, as suggested by the naivety of the storytelling and dialogue. Ultimately, Edge of History just couldn't find a consistent, devoted audience to justify the investment. It was canceled after a single season. Amazon has long been known to spend mind-boggling amounts of money on shows. Sometimes the reasoning makes sense. If any streaming series was to be the most expensive ever made, you'd probably expect it to be something like The Lord of the Rings: The Rings of Power.
True creation requires sacrifice.
But what's really astonishing is that if The Rings of Power didn't exist, the most expensive television series of all time would be Citadel, a spy thriller set in the real world with just 4 regular characters. To be sure, Citadel looks expensive. Like a lot of spy fiction, it deals in affluence, access, and expensive globetrotting. But a show that reportedly cost nearly $300 million for a 6-episode season should probably have been a little more momentous. Lambasted by critics and audiences alike, Citadel enjoyed high viewership figures, yet utterly failed to make the kind of cultural splash that Amazon had hoped for. Just to cite one number, the show currently counts a measly 35,000 audience ratings on IMDb, while Netflix's significantly cheaper spy show, The Recruit, has 48,000. A second season of The Citadel is on the way, which is mostly testament to the fact that Amazon.com Inc. is richer than God. Yet the company has since downgraded its plan to use the show as the impetus for a slew of global spin-offs, and it remains to be seen if a third season will ever see the light of day. When HBO's The Idol was announced in June 2021, the 2 creatives behind it were both experiencing the kind of career high that can make someone feel invincible. Sam Levinson was still riding a tidal wave of success from the massively popular first season of Euphoria, which had unexpectedly landed 3 primetime Emmys just a few months earlier. Abel Tesfaye, meanwhile, was The Weeknd, already the world's biggest male pop star, then fresh off his history-making Super Bowl halftime show performance. So it probably made sense for them to join forces. The Idol was to be Levinson's next TV showstopper and Tesfaye's long-awaited break into acting.
Let me catch you looking at her again. Let me catch you looking at her again. Let me catch you looking at her again.
But when the time came for The Idol to actually get off the ground, it crashed and burned instead. The production schedule faced months-long delays. Original director Amy Seimetz was fired with 80% of the show already filmed. A complete creative overhaul reportedly upset crew members, the episode order shrunk from 6 to 5, and the budget reportedly shot to $75 million. And then, when The Idol finally premiered in June 2023, it turned out to be a total critical failure. The show's ratings were largely dismal too, forcing HBO to put The Idol out of its misery soon after the season was over. Levinson and Tesfaye have both since moved on to other ventures. It's always a tall order to set a realistic film or series in space, especially when it comes to visual effects. The filmmakers must find a means to not only depict zero gravity in a convincing manner, but also make it work for the narrative at hand. Every production will come up with its own way to portray the tricky, fearsome fabric of space, and every idea will be usually complex, expensive, and difficult to pull off. This was all true of Constellation, the Apple TV Plus sci-fi series that aired one season in early 2024 before being unceremoniously canceled. To streamline production and save money, the show's crew came up with a new way to shoot zero-G involving a state-of-the-art 3D track system. But even that innovative solution contributed to a single-season budget of roughly $110 million for the production. Although the series received positive reviews overall, it had budgeted far above its capacity to bring in viewers and subscribers, a common problem for streaming shows. The first season was released over approximately 1 month between February and March 2024, and less than 2 months later, Apple had already pulled the plug. Not exactly a glorious ending for a show that had reportedly cost over $13 million per episode. Were KAOS less expensive to produce, there's a chance it would have landed a second season. This comedic take on Greek mythology scored around 20.2 million views between its premiere and the end of 2024, making it the 35th most-watched season of television on Netflix in 2024's second half. For a lower budget show, or one that might have contended at the Emmys, those might have counted as solid viewership numbers. For a show estimated to have cost around $56 million for 8 episodes, however, they weren't strong enough for the streamer to justify a renewal. With the series ending on a cliffhanger, fans were understandably frustrated when KAOS was canceled, with many protesting on social media and some even putting together petitions and boycott campaigns.
KAOS is coming.
The show has since been held up as an example of Netflix's trigger-happy approach to cancellations in general. As many fans have pointed out, such quick write-offs often create a vicious cycle, with people less likely to watch shows that are unlikely to get a proper ending. Despite receiving halfway decent ratings and boasting big-name producers Steven Spielberg and Peter Chernin, prehistoric sci-fi drama Terra Nova was a bit too rich for Fox's blood. The 2011 show cost a whopping $14 million for the 2-hour pilot, and each subsequent episode carried a price tag of $4 million. That's a lot of cheddar, even for a dinosaur-laden primetime show with a steady 7 million viewers. Sadly, some behind-the-scenes trouble didn't do the series any favors. Pilot scriptwriter Craig Silverstein ended up moving over to work on Nikita instead, and numerous changes in staff led to a costly union-induced $660,000 fine for delaying production. Terra Nova itself was actually good enough to warrant consideration for a second season, but a failure to secure high-level writing talent led Fox to decide that it couldn't justify such a costly endeavor. Today, the show stands as one of the most expensive flops in the history of network television. Based on Robert J. Sawyer's 1999 sci-fi novel of the same name, 2009's FlashForward was one of the most expensive network shows of all time. At the time, director and executive producer David S. Goyer confirmed that the show wasn't cheap in an interview with The Wrap. He said, "The only way to get more eyeballs back to the screen is to do a big quality show. And if the show involves a lot of spectacle and scope like FlashForward does, you have to deliver on the promise. ABC has been very good about opening up the piggy bank." In hindsight, ABC probably wishes it kept that piggy bank stashed away. Despite reasonable critical reactions and solid fan reviews, the series' viewership dwindled rapidly after it began airing. A 3-month hiatus didn't do the show any favors either, and a ranking of 50th among its competitors simply failed to justify its blockbuster price tag. Competing with other big-money pilots at the start of the 2007-2008 financial crisis, NBC's reimagining of the popular 1970s series The Bionic Woman was a massive and expensive flop. The show cost somewhere in the vicinity of $7 to $8 million for the pilot alone. After all, bionic appendages don't make themselves. Still, the high price tag wouldn't have been so bad if the show had legs. Yet not even superhuman speed could keep Bionic Woman in the race. It's not like the show stood much of a chance either. As you may remember, the fall of 2007 was a dark time for fans of network television.
Brothers and sisters, it's time for us to take a stand.
When the Writers Guild of America went on strike, the cast of Bionic Woman had their contracts suspended while production was put on hold. The show never recovered. After this, it experienced a dramatic drop in ratings before being kicked to the curb. At this point, Nickelodeon must have sold so many Invader Zim hoodies at Hot Topic that the show has to have turned a profit. The thing with cult hits, however, is they aren't usually hits to begin with. and, due to weak ratings, Invader Zim was cancelled just 27 episodes into its 40-episode run. Aside from the Christmas special finale, the 6 completed Season 2 episodes didn't even air on Nickelodeon. They eventually saw a release on DVD and the Nicktoons digital cable network. Posting on his blog, creator Jonan Vasquez revealed more about his show's problems. He wrote, "The most likely culprits are simply ratings and the sheer expense of the show, which was monstrously expensive at the time, especially when compared to more modern Flash-based savings fests. The high-quality animation of Invader Zim was estimated to have cost over $1 million per episode. Back in 2011, even 10 years after the show premiered, the average Nicktoon cost only around $600,000 to $700,000 per episode." While a flop with the primary Nickelodeon audience, Zim remained beloved enough with older viewers to get a run of tie-in comic books and a Netflix movie, Invader Zim: Enter the Florpus, in 2019. Another well-liked but underwatched science fiction flop, Now and Again, begins with John Goodman playing insurance agent Michael Wiseman, until he's caught up in an accident, prompting the government to transplant his brain into a genetically engineered body played by Eric Close.
Take a look at this. I've never done one of these before. Never been able to.
This was creator Glenn Gordon Caron's return to television after his hit dramedy Moonlighting, with Caron going on to have another hit series with the supernatural drama Medium. Each episode of Now and Again cost $2.4 million to make, over $1 million more than the revenues the show earned from advertising. In light of those numbers, CBS president Les Moonves told the Charlotte Observer, "It would have been idiotic to pick up that show." The show's ratings struggles can be blamed in part on weak lead-in shows plus intense competition from other networks. And while its quirky combination of sci-fi super spy and rom-com elements appealed to critics, that same genre blending made it harder to sell to broader audiences. Glenn Morgan and James Wong wrote several of the best episodes of The X-Files together, so it was no surprise that, in 1995, Fox gave them the chance to make their own science fiction series. Set in the year 2063, Space Above and Beyond followed the exploits of Wildcards, a team of Marines fighting in a war against aliens known as the Chigs. The show was said to cost over $2 million per episode, more than double the standard network budget at the time, but Space was canceled after only one season. Morgan and Wong attributed this speedy cancellation to the network's ineptitude, blaming their show's failure on inconsistent scheduling and a lack of promotion. So, knowing that the writing was on the wall for them, the duo scrapped their plans to lead into a second season and instead killed off most of the main characters in the finale. Morgan and Wong would return to writing for The X-Files and its spin-off series Millennium. Space Above and Beyond, meanwhile, has since been praised by fans and critics as a show that was ahead of its time.
Developed by Lana and Lily Wachowski along with Babylon 5 creator J. Michael Straczynski, Sense8 premiered on Netflix in 2015. The show follows a group of people from around the world who inexplicably gain the ability to psychically link with each other. Before they know it, they're being menaced by a secret organization, apparently led by an enigmatic individual known as Whispers. Sense8 received positive reviews from both critics and viewers and won a number of awards. But that didn't stop Netflix from canceling the show at the end of Season 2. An outcry from fans led to the streaming giant producing a final 2.5-hour-long finale to tie up the story and ensure it didn't end on a cliffhanger. Variety reported that Ted Sarandos, chief content officer for Netflix at the time, confirmed the show was simply proving to be too expensive considering its small audience. While the company doesn't generally release information about budgets and viewing figures, the fact that it cost around $9 million per episode was seemingly too much for Netflix to justify. Most of that cost came down to the long production time, and the fact that it was filmed on location around the world. Netflix is no stranger to canceling high-profile shows if they don't live up to the company's expectations, which could mean they haven't managed to attract enough viewers. It shouldn't come as a huge surprise that The Get Down was axed after just a single season, despite rave reviews and numerous award nominations. Created by director Baz Luhrmann and Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright Stephen Adly Guirgis, the 2016 musical drama focuses on a group of teenagers living in the South Bronx of New York during the 1970s. Netflix announced that The Get Down would not be returning to the streaming service in 2017, having already cut down the first season from 13 episodes to 11. This was largely a result of costly production delays and the mid-season departure of showrunner Sean Ryan. According to Variety, research suggested that the show received just a fraction of the viewers as other Netflix originals, and interest appeared to drop off quickly. Considering the first season apparently cost around $120 million, it's little wonder that Netflix did not want to commit to more episodes.
What'd you think? You were just gonna keep running this thing without my knowledge?
Information regarding the Mount Inostranco facility has always been on a need-to-know basis.
The Event is an NBC sci-fi thriller series that first hit television screens in 2010 and ran for a single season before it was unceremoniously shelved after just 22 episodes. The story focuses on a group of extraterrestrials who crash land on Earth in a remote region of Alaska during World War II. Those on board the unidentified craft are taken prisoner and held in captivity by the United States. Although many survivors evade capture and manage to hide among the human population, when a new president takes office, he plans to free the aliens and reveal their existence to the world, but is quickly caught up in an assassination attempt. Even though the event had a strong start when it was first broadcast, it quickly began to lose viewers. The series also failed to impress critics, making it a likely contender for cancellation. While an exact budget has never been revealed, The Hollywood Reporter indicated that NBC spent at least $10 million marketing the event, suggesting that it was a big-budget undertaking. When most people think of The Fugitive, they'd likely picture the 1993 film starring Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones. Dr. Richard Kimball is framed for the murder of his wife and sentenced to death for killing her. He's inadvertently freed, however, while being transported to prison, and sets out to find the actual culprit while being pursued by US Marshals. There have been multiple versions of the story over the years, dating back to the original 1960s television series. In 2000, CBS launched a remake of the earlier show, also titled The Fugitive, with Tim Daly portraying Kimball and Michael T. Williamson as a US Marshal trying to apprehend him. It was cancelled after one season, ending on a cliffhanger. The Post-Gazette reported that the pilot alone cost an estimated $6 million to produce, a rather large figure for 2000. According to The Hollywood Reporter, drama pilots cost $5 million on average in 2007, suggesting that The Fugitive was certainly on the high scale for a television series. Although it is not part of the official canon of the Star Wars universe, the Star Wars Holiday Special came out not long after the first film and is set between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. It centers on Chewbacca and Han Solo's attempt to visit the planet Kashyyyk, while being pursued by Imperial forces and bounty hunter Boba Fett. The $1 million budget, which was around 10% of the total cost of A New Hope, is equivalent to more than $4.5 million today. So the special was certainly an expensive production. The show was universally panned by almost everyone who has seen it. Even those who worked on the project, including cast members such as Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford, have been critical of the project and how it turned out.
Do you remember making this Christmas special? I think it was 1978. No, you don't remember it?
Star Wars creator and director George Lucas has even remarked that he wants to destroy every copy of the special that is still available. Starring Natalie Martinez, Kate Bosworth, Kyle Schmid, and Sibylla Dean, The Island is a Netflix sci-fi thriller that tracks 10 strangers who wake up on a beach without any idea how they got there or knowledge about their own identities. Conflict soon breaks out, and it is later revealed that this is a digital simulation meant to test whether violent criminals will return to the way they once behaved under all new circumstances. After its premiere, The Island was universally criticized. It holds a critics' rating of just 8% on Rotten Tomatoes and a similarly bad audience score, suggesting that very few people enjoyed anything about it. In its review of the series, Pace criticized its absurdity and called it an embarrassment. The writer stated, "I have watched some truly bad series in my day, but few that went off the rails this hard, this fast." Considering that The Island cost approximately $14 million for a limited series of just 7 40-minute episodes, few could argue this was a good investment. 2018's Troy Fall of a City was a co-production with Netflix and the BBC. Set during the mythological age of ancient Greece, the show charts a Trojan invasion after Paris, played by Louis Hunter, flees Sparta with Belladaine's Helen of Troy. This prompts a war between the two nations as Achilles and the other Greeks attempt to take back Helen. Despite positive reviews, Troy Fall of a City mostly failed to attract viewers. It managed just 3.2 million audience members for its opening episode, almost 2 million less than a typical Saturday evening primetime slot. A few episodes later, this number had dropped to just 1.6 million in total. A dramatic fall for an expensive show. According to The Times, the series cost almost $2.5 million an episode, putting it at a total cost of $20 million for its 8-episode first season. This made it one of the BBC's most expensive dramas ever made. An adaptation of Channel 4's 2013 series of the same name, Utopia is a 2020 Amazon Prime Video series that was created by Gone Girl writer Gillian Flynn. Starring John Cusack, Rainn Wilson, Sasha Lane, and Desmond Borges, the premise of the show is that a group of young adults discover a cult comic book and become aware of its connection to a vast global conspiracy. Armed with this knowledge, they set out to save the world, but also become targets for a secretive underground organization. Amazon cancelled the series after a single 8-episode season. Utopia was originally set to be produced by HBO, but the show was shelved following a dispute over the budget. According to rumors reported by Deadline, director David Fincher wanted more than $100 million to shoot the series, but executives at HBO were unwilling to offer more than $95 million. Although the series found a new home with Amazon, in light of COVID-19's all-encompassing impact on the real world of 2020, it's safe to say the TV viewing public of the era was uniquely disinterested in an escapist sci-fi fantasy program about a deadly global pandemic. Cop Rock was created by Stephen Bochco, the man responsible for the hit crime drama Hill Street Blues. But Cop Rock takes the concept of a typical police procedural and blends in musical elements. As the various detectives and police officers in the LAPD carry out their work, a number of choreographed musical numbers push the story forward and provide extra context to viewers.
There's going to be singing and dancing.
About police?
Yeah, about police.
As a highly experimental concept, Cop Rock was always likely to face an uphill battle, and the show was cancelled after just 11 episodes of the planned 13 that were due to make up Season 1. Reports from the time suggest that the series failed to attract a large enough audience and had average reviews. The New York Times revealed that Cop Rock also had a large budget, roughly 40% larger than equivalent shows in its time slot, and was costing more than $1 million per week. The Playboy Club is a 2011 NBC series set during the 1960s that follows the action around the first Playboy Club in Chicago. The show stars Eddie Cibrian as shady lawyer Nick Dalton and Amber Heard as a new employee at the club with a closet full of skeletons. Controversial from the moment that it first hit television screens, the Playboy Club did not prove to be a hit with critics or viewers. The series struggled in the ratings, losing millions of viewers between the first and third episodes, prompting NBC to cancel the show mid-season. Showrunner Chad Hodge confirmed that the Playboy Club had 4 completed episodes that remain unaired, despite the series costing NBC at least $2 million an episode. Friends was one of the biggest shows of the 90s. When it finally came to an end in 2004 after 10 seasons, it made perfect sense that NBC would want to continue its success in some way with a spin-off. The new series, which made its debut near the end of 2004 and was titled simply Joey, focused entirely on Matt LeBlanc's character, Joey Tribbiani, who moves to Hollywood to try and make it as a movie actor. The concept made sense, but the execution left a lot to be desired. Kevin Bright, one of the original Friends producers, believed that NBC had disregarded his ideas for the spin-off and made the show less fun than it should have been. Ratings plummeted from the first episode onward, and NBC chose to cancel the series midway through its Season 2. Although official figures about the costs of making Joey have never been detailed, UK Channel 5 was paying as much as £500,000 for each episode, a staggering 5 times more than the usual license fee. Meanwhile, LeBlanc claims that he earned $30 million for his role in the spin-off. Based on the 2013 book The Good Girls Revolt by Lynn Povich, Good Girls Revolt tells the story of a group of female writers at a news magazine who find themselves subjected to absurd amounts of sexism. Genevieve Angelson, Anna Camp, Erin Dark, and Hunter Parrish were part of the main cast, and the show was sometimes compared to the highly acclaimed Mad Men by critics and fans alike. Unfortunately, the high quality didn't translate into viewers, with Reuters revealing that only 1.6 million tuned in. With a budget in the region of $80 million, it is little wonder that Amazon chose not to renew for Season 2. A collaboration between Martin Scorsese, Terrence Winter, and Mick Jagger, Vinyl is a 2016 HBO series that focuses on the music scene in New York during the 1970s. As the tastes of the population shift from rock to disco and hip-hop music, a record company executive does his best to stay relevant in the shifting marketplace. Bobby Cannavale, Arto Esando, Jack Quaid, and Ray Romano had starring roles, while Scorsese himself executive produced and directed the 2-hour-long pilot.
Do you have any idea how huge that is?
Before Episode 1 even hit TV screens, HBO had given the green light for Season 2, but the network quickly reversed course. Only months after the show's first season finale aired, HBO confirmed that Vinyl had instead been cancelled as it failed to land. Costing $100 million for the first season, that accounts to $10 million per episode. It was one of HBO's most expensive projects, but also failed to find an audience, and managed less than 1 million viewers on average. Scorsese, however, believes that the series could have been more successful if he had directed all the episodes and devoted more time to it. Despite plenty of criticism about its final season, Game of Thrones was such a hit that HBO was always likely to continue the franchise in some way. Fans eventually got more Westeros with the popular spin-off series House of the Dragon, but long before that, another project was in the works. Known by its production name Bloodmoon, this show was set to take place thousands of years before the events of Game of Thrones. HBO officially greenlit a pilot for the series in 2018, and cast actors such as Naomi Watts in key roles. With a budget of $30 million, the Bloodmoon pilot cost more than the $15 million spent on each episode of the final season of Game of Thrones. Meanwhile, Deadline reported that there were long delays and production issues throughout the filming of the pilot, including a complete re-edit when HBO executives were unconvinced after seeing the first cut. HBO pulled the plug shortly after, and locked the pilot away so that no one would ever get to see it.
Most people today know Battlestar Galactica as the marathon-worthy sci-fi series that ran from 2003 to 2009. Hardcore fans, however, might remember that the series originated in 1978 and tanked in the ratings a year later. Setting out to be a TV take on Star Wars, the original Galactica cost roughly $1 million per episode, more than double that of a typical primetime show at the time, and the equivalent of over $3.7 million today. At first, it was worth the price tag. The series' early episodes attracted positive reviews and healthy ratings, but those ratings eventually began to slip, and behind-the-scenes issues like censorship made production difficult. Ultimately, Battlestar Galactica couldn't pull its weight as compared to other less expensive network hits, such as ABC's own Mork and Mindy, and the show was canceled after a single season. The network did give it another go with Galactica 1980, but that show only lasted 10 episodes before being decommissioned due to non-existent viewers. When it comes to expensive flops, you'd be hard-pressed to find a bigger train wreck than 1979's Supertrain. As you might expect from the title, the NBC show was basically just Love Boat meets Snowpiercer, set on a massive nuclear-powered locomotive featuring its own nightclubs and casinos that could speed from New York to Los Angeles at 200 miles per hour. The thing is, the train didn't actually exist, so the show's creators used expensive model trains while filming. Unfortunately, the models weren't particularly durable, and one of them was destroyed in a crash before the first episode was even filmed. After the show debuted to downright terrible ratings, famous celebrities were brought on to keep Supertrain on track. Tony Danza, Rue McClanahan, and Dick Van Dyke all made guest appearances. But even that late 70s star power couldn't stop Supertrain from going off the rails. The show was canceled after 9 episodes and remains one of NBC's costliest flops to date at a reported $4 million an episode. It makes a lot of sense that after Shrek raked it in at the box office, NBC was willing to fork over big bucks to DreamWorks for a computer-animated show of their own. It makes a lot less sense that they decided that the project that would be worth $2.5 million of their money would be a show that recast the White Lions from Siegfried and Roy's famous Las Vegas magic act as a wacky sitcom family. The result was Father of the Pride. Unlike Shrek, which somehow spawned an unstoppable franchise that we just can't seem to get rid of, it failed to capture the hearts and minds of those who watched it. It did, however, capture plenty of unwanted attention. The Parents Television Council flooded the FCC with allegations that Father of the Pride was indecent. To make matters worse, the show came in hot on the heels of Roy being nearly mauled to death when one of his tigers dragged him off stage by the neck, the first such accident in more than 5,000 shows. With all that stacked against it, it didn't take long for NBC to make the show disappear after only 13 episodes. When some shows get canceled, they leave viewers feeling like they missed out on something good that never got a chance to shine. When CBS dropped the hammer on 2007's Viva Laughlin, however, it was a mercy killing that freed the audience from what the New York Times suggested might be the worst show in the history of television. Made in an effort to diverge from the standard lineup of police procedurals and grandparent-focused sitcoms, CBS banked big on a remake of Viva Blackpool, a popular BBC show with a bizarre premise. A murder mystery that would occasionally break out into elaborate musical numbers where the cast sang pop songs. Despite the presence of producer and star Hugh Jackman, critics and viewers alike hated the casino-themed musical from the opening number. Its ratings were dismal, and it quickly became a go-to punchline on the E! Network's The Soup as a show beloved by hundreds, which might have been overstating it. After only 2 episodes, Viva Laughlin danced its way off airwaves. And with the pilot purportedly costing $6.8 million, cutting losses early was probably the right call. As the first series ordered under Chris Albrecht, the newly crowned president and CEO of Starz, hopes were riding high on 2011's Arthurian drama, Camelot. According to Albrecht, the show was based on, quote, an idea of hope that has resonated at different times throughout history. Unfortunately, 2011 was not one of those times. Critical reviews of Camelot were less than stellar. But while the show still saw solid ratings during its final episodes, Starz canceled the fantasy drama after only one season. Scheduling conflicts with lead cast members Joseph Fiennes, Jamie Campbell-Bower, and Ava Green made a sophomore effort more trouble than it was worth. And it was worth quite a lot. According to the Wall Street Journal, the series cost roughly $7 million per episode. That's a lot of money, huh? Look, you can't blame us for trying that one. Betting on the star power of Deadwood's Ian McShane, the writing prowess of American Gods' Michael Green, and some assistance from the Hunger Games Catching Fire director Francis Lawrence, NBC seemed poised to hit it big with 2009's Kings, an ambitious drama reimagining the life of the biblical King David in a modern setting. The 2-hour premiere cost a massive $10 million, with each subsequent episode coming in at $4 million a pop. With that kind of money behind a television series, you better believe the stakes were high. In this case, producers rolled snake eyes and cashed out with dismal ratings. But Kings wasn't just costly for NBC. Liberty Mutual invested a $5 million sponsorship into the show, reportedly aiming to subconsciously piggyback on the show's message of personal responsibility to encourage viewers to buy insurance. With barely anyone watching the show, however, it's safe to assume Liberty Mutual didn't exactly get what it paid for. Kings was first banished to the dog days of summer before NBC officially called it quits. Still, the show isn't as bad as its ratings imply, and it might be worth going back if you missed it the first time around. Netflix is no stranger to dropping big money on big projects, but in the case of 2014's Marco Polo, the series never really found its way to an audience and wound up losing big in the process. At the time of Marco Polo's release, no active series was more expensive to produce, except HBO's fantasy juggernaut Game of Thrones. The first season of Netflix's Kublai Khan-centered drama cost a staggering $90 million, which weighs in at $9 million per episode. Unfortunately for Netflix, Marco Polo never came close to Game of Thrones' success. Despite lackluster critical reviews, Netflix gave Marco Polo a second season. The sophomore effort was less popular than the first, prompting the streaming service to give the series the axe. In this case, a 13th century Mongol axe.